This is a program about China, so why are we beginning in Rolla, Missouri, showing you a bunch of middle-aged blue-collar workers wandering around a job fair?
Do you have any office positions open?
Currently,
No?
Because China is where their jobs went. China, which relates how exactly to Mexican migrant workers picking cotton in North Carolina? Well, that's where the cotton is going. China.
Sit down, please. Boys and girls, I feel a little cold. I think I need some clothes.
Don't worry, that North Carolina cotton will be back as soon as Chinese workers have milled it and cut it and turned it into It won't occur to these children for some years to come, but they are being trained to compete in the global marketplace.
I used to work at Briggs & Stratton, and I'm unemployed, and I'm looking for a job.
American unemployed, Chinese children, Mexican migrant workers. They don't know one another. They may not even care about one another. But as you'll see, they're all having an impact on one another's lives.
A 7.9 magnitude earthquake hit in mid-afternoon.
Schools and dormitories have all collapsed.
Puts the death toll more than 55,000.
The spectacle of a profound national tragedy has a way of erasing differences. We can all relate to people who never had much and who've lost what little they had. There, but for the grace of God, we say. The earthquake struck a region of China's heartland that the government has targeted for growth. All we've been seeing these last couple of months, though, what has engaged our attention and compassion, is the massive destruction. The loss of so many homes, so many schools, the death of so many tens of thousands, so many children. We look at these scenes, and even those among us who feel no connection or even kinship with the Chinese can empathize, there but for the grace of God. We are all vulnerable, and these days we are all interdependent. We've been working for months in southwestern China, near where the earthquake struck. Our base was the biggest city that most Americans have never heard of, Chongqing. That's where it is on the map, along the Yangtze River, about 1,500 miles southwest of Shanghai. It's a city with an attitude, a place that has something to prove. And once we've shown you a few of the things that are happening in Chongqing, you'll begin to understand why China and the United States might have a very difficult time getting along without each other anymore. The signs of interdependence are everywhere. The city is blossoming with the icons of American brands like Ford, Ethan Allen, and Walmart. And that's merely scratching the surface. Love it or hate it, our economic futures seem irrevocably linked. It's a reality. Get used to it. Let me set the scene for you. A downtown square in Chongqing ringed with upscale shops, most of them selling products that would be completely out of reach, unthinkably expensive for most Chinese. And yet, there is a new and rapidly growing class of Chinese who can and do shop here. People for whom price is no object. Hundreds of thousands, perhaps even millions of such people. A huge, new, and expanding market for high-end Western goods. But China's new wealth and its growing middle class are still dwarfed by its hundreds of millions who live just at the edge of survival. The brutal truth is that China can barely take care of its people. There are simply too many, which is why you see murals all over the countryside proclaiming the government's one-child policy. That's been the law for decades now. To this day, the government will impose a hefty fine, sometimes amounting for the poor to half a year's salary or more, on a couple that has a second child. If anything, that has made children especially precious to the Chinese. Perhaps the worst unintended consequence of that one-child policy is that the earthquake left so many families childless. If they're still young enough to have children, and if they can prove their loss, those families will now be granted the right to try again. They love children, they really do. But their government is trying to cope with the largest population in the world, competing for very limited resources. You need to be able to look past the images of regimented youngsters wearing the symbolic red kerchiefs. There are tens of millions of these children and hundreds of millions of their desperately poor adult relatives. They all need to be employed and housed and fed. And communism didn't do it. What's beginning to do the job is capitalism. As for that massive population base of poor people, they are China's weakness and its strength. Call it the Chinese paradox. They are little engines of ambition. All but vibrating with the earnest desire to succeed. And all over China, from earliest childhood on, English and computer literacy are being drummed into their little heads. China has big plans for this generation. Their skills will far exceed those of their parents, but that's down the road. For the time being, China's most significant contribution to the global economy remains cheap, reliable labor. Line them up, snap it on, plug it in, check it out, send it off. Snap it on, plug it in, check it out, send it off. Snap it on, plug it in, check it out, send it off. Snap it on, plug it in, check it out, send it off. It's an endless, mindless, bottomless pit of a job. Anyone who's ever worked an assembly line can tell you about the pressure and the boredom and the fatigue. But if they don't like it, and many of them don't, there is a vast labor force of Chinese country people, peasants and farmers, more of them than the combined populations of the United States and all of Europe, desperate to take their places. And that is where it all begins. In November of 2007, a demolition company in Las Vegas, Nevada, fulfilled its contract to bring down the old Frontier Casino and Hotel. It was done in quintessentially American style. Quickly, efficiently, totally. The debris loaded onto trucks and headed for landfill. What this is not is a simple demolition project. This is a Chinese-style recovery operation. Buried within each of these concrete beams is a long, valuable piece of steel rebar that can be melted down, recast, and reused. When labor is plentiful and cheap enough, it makes good economic sense to chip the mortar off each individual brick so that it can be reused in the building of a new structure. These women make the equivalent of $1 to $2 a day. Chip off the mortar, gather up the bricks, hoist them on your shoulder, dump them in the truck. Chip off the mortar, gather up the bricks, hoist them on your shoulder, dump them in the truck. The men here make more than the women. Still only $3 to $4 a day, but they consider that good pay compared to what they can earn at home. which is essentially nothing. Most of these people were subsistence farmers who just barely fed themselves and their families. In a good year, they might have enough food left over to raise a pig or two that they could slaughter or sell at market.
If I stay home working in farmland, I won't make money.
If you're looking for a job in construction, this is the place to be. It's estimated that 1.5 million people here are working on construction-related jobs. It's already a big city, about 13.5 million, but it's part of an enormous municipality. A region the size of Austria, with an overall population of more than 30 million people. The goal over the next 10 to 15 years is to expand the city out and draw the people in until Chongqing is a mega city of 20 million with only 10 million or so people left in the remaining countryside. But the larger goal is to turn Chongqing into an industrial hub, an international center of industry and trade. The city has already attracted significant American investment, like this Briggs & Stratton plant, where Chinese workers are now on the assembly line building American engines.
Just turned my life upside down. Gotta look for a new career.
Those engines used to be built here at this shuttered Briggs & Stratton plant in Rolla, Missouri.
I hate the fact that it cost me my job, but, you know, businesses are out to make money.
We have a couple of openings on the...
And while the move was good for the corporate bottom line, it badly hurt some of the workers, especially the older ones who thought they'd retire at Briggs. Now, like awkward teenagers at a prom, they find themselves shuffling through a job fair.
It's going to be hard for me to get a job because I'm 61 years old. So far, every place I've applied for says I'm overqualified. You know, the polite way saying you're too old.
I'm Pam Leeser. I'm a dislocated worker from Briggs & Stratton.
Pam Leeser had been working at Briggs & Stratton for almost 11 years. She's clearly uncomfortable shopping for a new job. She never thought she'd have to. Until the day a delegation from Chongqing, China, came calling.
They had a translator with them. And my boss come up and he asked me if I would care to explain to them what my job was and how I did my job. And I looked at him and I told him, no, I will not. I just knew that down the road I was going to be losing my job.
Which is exactly what did happen to about 480 Briggs & Stratton workers on September 28, 2007.
Jim, I don't know if you were kidding me before or exaggerating, but you were talking at one point about being the most hated guy at the home plant in Missouri. True?
I think most hated was a bit of an exaggeration.
Jim Marceau runs Briggs & Stratton's operation in Chongqing, China.
A lot of people were concerned with us building a factory in China that it would take jobs from the United States. This plant was built so we could try to make engines inexpensively enough where we could sell in the Asia market. It wasn't made to take jobs from the States.
Which is true. That was the plan. But the engines remained too expensive for China and for the rest of the Asian market. So now you've got Chinese workers assembling the engines in Chongqing, and even with the additional cost of shipping them halfway around the world, there's still a bargain in Europe and the US, where they're powering lawnmowers, snowblowers, and generators. What's involved is just a fraction of the overall Briggs & Stratton operation, but Chongqing's gain was Rolla, Missouri's loss.
Well, after our last engine was built, everybody was gone. I mean, people wanted to get out of there. But I was one of them, stayed till 3 o'clock. I thought, they're paying me for my whole 8 hours.
$11.17 an hour is what Pam earned. Not a ton of money in Rolla, Missouri, or in the 3 other towns with Briggs factories, but it's a living wage. The fact is that Briggs & Stratton has kept 90% of its manufacturing in the United States, and that profitable plant in Chongqing is helping to keep the company competitive.
The labor is 5% of what it costs in the States, or 10% or 20%. That's where you save your money.
Well, I thought I was really stable at Briggs & Stratton. I thought I'd stay there the rest of my life and retire there. Well, now I'm 50 and I have to start all over again looking for another job.
Well, it's nice to meet you. You too. Good luck.
What do you say to someone caught in the backwash of the global marketplace?
You may want to try hiking. Have you found that?
Or, for that matter, to someone on the other side of the world trying to catch the next wave?
The basic equipment you need for hiking is simple.
Li Dan is 17 years old, and her parents are peasant farmers. Their combined annual income is less than $600, roughly half of which goes toward the payment of Li Dan's tuition, food, and housing at this boarding school in Chongqing. She is living the American dream of a better life than the one her parents have known.
仔细读几遍吗？
This is the fabric room of one of America's biggest and best-known furniture manufacturers. But if you look closely, you'll see that even Ethan Allen in Maiden, North Carolina, has integrated Chinese-made components into its supply chain. Thousands of rolls of fabric awaiting the day when they will be turned into custom-made upholstery. Made in China. Made in China. Made in China. Very possibly, though, spun out of cotton from here in North Carolina.
All of our textile mills have moved overseas, either to South America or China.
Linwood Vick is the foreman on his father's farm.
There are very few mills left in North Carolina, so all of our cotton is now being exported.
The cotton and the tobacco grown on this farm are being exported, and the labor force is being imported. Legal migrant workers from Mexico.
We use migrant workers from Mexico because they are a reliable workforce. They do an excellent job. Our local labor in North Carolina does not want to work the hours or do the hard work. It's extremely hard work.
That's your basic engine of today's global economy, cheap labor. Either it migrates to where the work is, or the work migrates to where there is an abundant supply of cheap labor. What they are assembling at this Ethan Allen furniture plant is what the company calls the Pratt sofa. It's a pretty expensive piece of furniture, costs a couple of $1,000s. And the base, this part with the hand-turned legs, is also made in China. Anna Rocket, who's 23, does quality control.
I'm an inspector here at Ethan Allen. Basically what I do is I clip strings, make sure the piece of furniture looks perfect, does it have any holes in it, does it have any mishaps in it before we send it out the door.
Anna earns about $20 an hour, which is roughly what 17-year-old Mu Wen-jing earns in a week, doing essentially the same job, quality control, on these boom boxes which are bound for the United States. Walmart, to be precise. What confuses Mu Wen-jing is that Americans get to buy cheap imports while she can't afford anything made outside of China.
That's what she felt the most unfair thing. Very expensive here, but why in America it's so cheap?
Because here in China, people work for very low pay.
Do you guys get high pay?
Yeah, we get high pay. Yeah.
How much?
Too much. Maybe you should be a television reporter. What do you think?
Do you think yes?
Yeah.
Yeah, because you said staying in this factory is a waste of her talent, actually.
A waste of her talent. I like that.
which is pretty much the way Anna Rocket back at the Ethan Allen plant in North Carolina sees things too.
It's just a bunch of different things that you have to look for. It's kind of almost a very tedious job at times.
But here's the kicker. The Pratt sofa that Randy Smith is working on here, that's headed to China, Chongqing to be precise. China's growing middle class has got plenty of money, and they appreciate good American workmanship.
I think it's wonderful. As long as we manufacture the furniture here, we can sell it to anybody we want to. It's fine. I have no problem with it.
The balance of trade, though, between China and the United States remains totally out of whack. Americans buy vastly more from China than the other way around. Mu Wenjing's boss, the man who manages this plant assembling tens of thousands of DVD players and boomboxes, was born in Taiwan and worked for 15 years in Orange County, California. Matt Shaw's biggest outlet is Walmart.
Why would Walmart come all the way to China to buy these things here?
Because what I can tell you right now is today, this type of DVD player we provided to Walmart, we have the lowest cost in the world.
The lowest cost?
Yes. I think that's the whole purpose.
So the lowest costs means you're paying the lowest salaries in the world.
It means we have lowest salaries. It means we have a higher efficiency.
And few American firms understand those efficiencies quite as well as Apple. The company boosts its bottom line with the huge savings that come with the label assembled in China. But it's the company's design prowess and marketing savvy that motivates their consumers. That's why, for example, every iPod box carries the words "Designed by Apple in California." When you buy an iPod for $299, Apple makes a profit of $80. The Taiwanese company that assembles the parts in mainland China earns about $4. The same dynamic that works for Apple also works for Walmart, but on a much larger scale and at much lower prices. In fact, it's the Walmart credo: buy cheap, sell cheap. And it's precisely what attracts these Mexican migrants who work on the Vick family farm in North Carolina.
Every Saturday afternoon and Sunday, they go to Walmart and spend it, whether they're buying their groceries, their clothes, or their toys for their kids.
Walmart's slogan, "Everyday low prices," could almost serve as an anthem for the global economy. These Mexican migrant workers are one strand of a complex fabric that makes Walmart possible. On this trip, they're stocking up in preparation for their return home to Mexico. And if they take one of these boomboxes home as a gift, it's a good deal, only $19.98. Remember that sassy 17-year-old with a baseball cap and an attitude? But she's certainly not making a whole lot of money. And neither, for that matter, is her boss. He understands that Walmart has some major expenses to absorb.
They have to pay the shipping from Shanghai to LA. They have to pay their stores. They have to pay their employee, all of their overheads, of course.
But if I said to you, at the end of the day, who makes more money on each of these DVDs, you or Walmart?
Of course, Walmart.
Moving manufacturing to China also benefits Briggs & Stratton. The company's doing just fine with its plant in Chongqing. Of course, that's no comfort to Pam Leeser, whose job was outsourced to China.
We're going to wind up having no jobs. There's not going to be nothing here in the United States. It's all going to be overseas.
Okay, nice to meet you.
I'm just hoping that the government wakes up and starts seeing what it's doing to United States citizens.
Of course, even Pam Leeser shops at Walmart.
We shopped at Walmart today in Rolla, my husband and I did. We could save money by shopping at Walmart instead of getting the items here in this little town.
So in other words, the Walmart's cheaper?
Yes.
The reason that everything's so cheap at Walmart is because things are made in China.
So in a way, you benefit from it?
Yes.
So how do you feel about that?
If Pam Leeser doesn't have an answer for globalization's adverse effect on American workers, well, no one else does either. At age 50, she is out of work and looking for a job. You can hardly expect her to be happy about the bargains at Walmart when those are largely the product of cheap foreign labor, especially from China. After all, that's how she came to lose her job in the first place. Although it's still morning and he has a field of lotus roots to harvest, Li Xingfu is slightly drunk.
I'm so tired of him. He's such a pain. He loves drinking.
That's Mr. Li's wife, Jingong Lu.
We don't have a good relationship. We're staying together because of our daughter.
If the daughter looks slightly familiar to you, you're right. You saw Li down at school, in English class. Every weekend, she comes home to her parents' village. At the beginning of every week, she boards a commuter bus to another village, where she takes a tiny three-wheeled taxi, which bumps its way through farmland to another bus stop. There, she catches a Chongqing municipal bus, which drops her at a stop near her boarding school. A school which her father and his family think is a waste of money.
According to their view, she should have stopped receiving an education a long time ago. They think it is useless for a girl to be schooled. The son should be educated. I feel it is really unfair.
Everything that attracts foreign investment to China rests on the foundation of cheap labor, and Jingong Lu, staggering under the weight of these lotus roots, may be a perfect transitional figure. 6 and sometimes 7 mornings a week during harvest season, she carries 120 pounds of produce, which is roughly what she weighs, to market. She's happy if the day's work yields $3. After all expenses are paid, renting the land, buying the seed, the daily bus fare to town, the family nets $570 a year. Half of that goes toward Li Dan's expenses at boarding school. "15-year-old Kellen Zhang lives a far more privileged life in Potomac, Maryland, but she too has to cope with family separation. Her father is often gone for long stretches. Dr. He Jiang has moved back to China after living in Canada and then in the United States for 20 years. For 8 years, he worked as an AIDS researcher at the National Institutes of Health. 4 years ago, Dr. Jiang decided to establish his own lab. He's still trying to find a more effective treatment for AIDS, but now he's set up shop in Chongqing. Early every morning, he's on a conference call with his family.
Hi, honey.
Hey.
In Maryland, it's late afternoon,
So how are you guys doing?
Well, they said that they won.
and his son and daughter are just back from high school.
On the stats sheet.
Dr. Jiang's AIDS treatment has now entered the human trial stage in China. Between supervising those and spending time with his family in Potomac, he spends a lot of his life in airports and making that long commute. In Chongqing, he pays 1/5 what he did in Maryland for 10 times as much space. It's cheap labor, cheap facilities, cooperation from the government, and a huge base of people who have every disease known to man.
Yes. In fact, the major pharmaceutical companies are now in China building up their R&D center.
Is this good for America or bad for America?
I think overall, in the long run, is good for everybody. Because of a lower cost, eventually is going to lower the medical care, the drug price is going to go down.
And even with the pressure to keep prices on exports down, salaries for Chinese workers are going up. And management? Well, management is doing very nicely by anyone's standards. Seen here driving a luxury car through their gated community in Chongqing and into the driveway of their elegant new home, homemaker Zhang Xiaojing, her husband Ding Ming, and their 2-year-old daughter Ding Sihan. Mr. Ding is an executive at a thriving company that makes electrical components for motorcycle firms like Kawasaki and Suzuki. But Mrs. Zhang is rightly proud of her role in designing and decorating their new house. From a pretty in pink room for her daughter to the spacious family bathroom. Note the toddler's mini toilet. To the high-quality kitchen fixtures and top-of-the-line American appliances, it's a house fit for one of China's new captains of industry. Today is delivery day for some long-awaited new furniture, featuring both a red carpet and white glove delivery service, literally. As for the couch being so meticulously unwrapped, so gently, dare we say, lovingly moved and placed, that's the very couch that was assembled and upholstered in North Carolina, where it was placed on the legs and base shipped from China. And now, here it is. Ethan Allen's Pratt sofa, complete and in place at its final home in Chongqing, with Mrs. Zhang and Mr. Ding, who know a nice piece of American craftsmanship when they see it.
American products always look good, and the quality is always good too. And you know, my first car was a Buick, which drove very well. And our new American refrigerator has big double doors, and it's really well built. We're told you can even kick it.
Yes, my father told me we can pass this refrigerator down to our grandchildren.
Right. Both the fridge and the couch could be passed down through several generations. And they match the style of our house. That's why we chose them.
Socialism's dream of a classless society got lost somewhere between Mrs. Zhang's McMansion and Jingonglu's tiny farmhouse. But China is becoming a place where even gaps like that can be bridged.
Life is hard. What can we do? I'm planning to go out and look for a job in January or February.
Does your husband know that yet?
No, he doesn't know.
What do you think will be better about life in the city?
All I know is that I want to work for myself. I don't know how bright the future will be. As long as I can make enough to support myself, I'll be fine. I really don't get on with him. I'm so annoyed by him. If it hadn't been for my daughter, I would have left him a long time ago.
Jingonglu's chances of getting rich in her village of Dragon Spring or in the city were always slim and none. But China's experiment with capitalism offers a genuine window of hope to Li Dan, her daughter, the one with the education.
We'll go to see the field.
Chen Jiming is what is known in Chongqing as a bang bang man. In another time and place, he and his crew might have been called coolies. When the riverboats churn their way up and down the Yangtze, carrying foreign tourists to and from the scenic Three Gorges, Mr. Chun and the others carry their baggage up and down the embankment here in Chongqing. They don't know much about Americans, but what they know, they like.
Americans are great. Because their economy is more developed, they are more generous than the Germans and the French.
The Americans have lots of money?
Americans give good tips. They are very generous.
Tell me what you know about America.
As far as I know, America is the most advanced and also the richest country in the world.
It may have occurred to Mr. Chun that Americans and Chinese, who have been enemies, may one day be bitter rivals again.
And what about China? You think the day will come when China and America have to fight?
That is impossible. The relationship between America and China is pretty good right now. That won't happen.
Whether out of courtesy or intuition, Mr. Chun understands mutual interests when he sees them. As does American investment banker Simon Erblich.
America has to figure out what it wants to do here. China's growing fast, and they're opening up their doors. So either China in the long run is going to be a competitor of America's or a partner.
Both?
Or both, because being a partner with China, at the end of the day, is going to be good for everybody. Both financially speaking, politically speaking, from a humanitarian standpoint, that is a win-win situation for everybody. And you're not going to be able to avoid the efficiencies of market, the cheaper labor that's going to be available all over the world, and you can't keep running away from that.
Take silk making, for example, an ancient Chinese industry. These silkworm cocoons, nurtured on thousands of acres of Chinese mulberry bushes, are about to be relieved of their silken thread. They enjoy, thanks to Simon Erblich, a small, humble place on Wall Street. Another thread, if you'll pardon the pun, in the fabric of Sino-American relations.
So, what do you know about silk factories?
To be honest, not much.
But then it's not their expertise on silk production that makes Simon Erblich and his partner Dan Hirsch interesting to the Chinese. Simon and Dan find companies that can be listed on American stock exchanges. Let's say an antiquated silk factory that needs money to buy new technology. Chinese entrepreneur takes American investment, updates factory. Chinese government provides incentives, silk factory blossoms. In theory, everybody gets rich.
They were valued very low, $1 million, $2 million here in China.
So that's what you see as
an opportunity.
Shooting fish in a barrel.
Exactly.
Win-win?
Win-win.
For whom?
Everybody.
Just as one day, when millions of Chinese peasants have been drawn into the cities, the remaining farmers will start using engines, perhaps even Briggs & Stratton engines, to work larger plots of land.
When you have less farmers trying to do the same amount of work without the actual people, you know, they're going to have to start buying automated products to help them.
If I said to you, Jim, is there any way of untangling the Chinese-American relationship? Are we and the Chinese, for good or ill,
yeah, I think it's meshed. It's got to be meshed forever. I mean, if you look at the amount of companies in the United States that rely on Chinese-made products or Chinese-made materials, you know, if you try to pull that apart, you would have so many companies with complete loss of supply of what they do. So I think it's something that will only get more involved with China as time goes on.
The family-owned Bernhardt Furniture Company in Lenoir, North Carolina, moved some of its operations to China more than 25 years ago. That, too, says CEO Alex Bernhardt, has been a win-win proposition.
The work ethic comes to mind immediately. The people are diligent, work eagerly. They're eager to learn. We've been able to instill in them some of the quality aspirations and standards that Bernhardt has. So it's clearly, today, it's the country of choice for us.
Bernhardt explains to his American workers that outsourcing to China allowed him to keep plants open in the United States, while keeping his overall prices competitive. It's what he calls that Walmart think.
I shop at Walmart. I expect they do. I expect we're all using televisions and shoes and belts and cameras and clothing that is made somewhere else in the world. And they understand that the consumers today want great design, great quality, and a great price. And whether it's sad or just reality, the country of origin is not of great importance to consumers in America.
Bargains for the American consumer, quality exports for the growing Chinese middle class. Remember Ms. Zhang, the woman who bought the Ethan Allen couch? She drives a BMW from Germany, wears a Burberry shawl from England, and carries a Louis Vuitton handbag from France. She's paying her weekly visit to Walmart, which in Chongqing at least is one of the upscale places to shop. There are delicacies to be found here. Chicken feet, far superior to the local variety, imported from North Carolina. If you're trying to get a handle on the Sino-American relationship, Walmart's not a bad place to start. In America, where consumers are looking for cheap foreign imports, and now in China, where the Walmart name conveys a totally different image of quality and high-priced foreign imports. It's more than a toehold. Capitalism, of all things, has established a solid foothold in China. How about that? When the earthquake hit, China demonstrated one of the strengths of an authoritarian government. 100,000 troops mobilized and on the scene within hours, and China's Prime Minister on hand to oversee the situation. Vincent Lo is one of China's billionaire developers.
Democracy, of course, it sounds good, but in practice, it doesn't always bring you the results.
If you listen to a young, westernized fashion photographer, the Chinese government's approach is working.
I have to say that I love my country, but I don't love my government. I trust my government.
That in our next broadcast.